Hello, and welcome to my short overview on my presentation to the Meiji Restoration. My presentation has definitely gone through several different versions from the first time we uploaded our outline to updates on the presentation. I originally wanted to focus on revolts and rebellions against colonial empires throughout the modern world. That changed as being too broad of a topic to wanting to focus on the Meiji Restoration after we covered those readings and videos in our week 8, and then doing more research and background work on the topic. It's become even more narrow to specifically how Japan was reacting to Americans specifically, and how those reactions then ended up manifesting themselves in their art, their culture, and even in their writing. So that's what this presentation is going to cover. The context and overview. The Meiji Restoration is a social and political revolution in reaction to Japan's confrontation with Western military's ideas and people. The revolution would force Japan to deal with not only foreigners but also internal pressures related to rapidly changing socioeconomic conditions. From a global history perspective, the Meiji period, lasting from roughly the mid-1860s to the outbreak of World War I, is an excellent case study of how a country like Japan experienced confrontation with Westerners, like Americans. In addition, a study of the Meiji period offers a glimpse into the internal struggles and contradictions produced by a country intent on modernizing via methods that are literally foreign to the majority of the population. So when this restoration of the emperor who takes the name Meiji takes place, the immediate top-down transformation of society is completed within about 40 to 50 years. And the change is so dramatic that you cannot have instances of struggle, contradiction, um, revolt, um, human consequences, abuses, so on, that take place within such a short span of time. In the goal of just modernization along Western methods. So the focusing question I have for this presentation is how do Japanese reactions to Western encroachment manifest themselves in society and culture? The overall idea of the presentation, knowing that we're giving this in about an hour's time, is to have the group, and this is targeted primarily towards, upper high school, seniors, juniors in an AP level, undergraduates, and this is not graduate level material, but undergraduates in a survey course. This is intended for that audience. So the idea is to, with such a short, time period or such a short time in 60 minutes, is to really give them a really good overview of the Meiji Restoration just in like a short lecture, within 5 to 10 minutes, and then give them the majority of the time to view and analyze sources that relate to the restoration, the changes that happen in society and culture, uh, again, primarily represented through their confrontation with Americans. Um, so that's the focusing question. The task would be, again, explained here. Again, the idea of giving this to a high school class or undergraduates, you don't need to give them some focused instructions, is to read and analyze two different secondary sources on the Meiji Restoration. There are two sets of primary source visuals on the Meiji Restoration, and then there's one excerpted documentary, which is actually the same documentary that Professor Lee had us watch in our week 8 or 9 when we were covering this time period in Japan. The excerpted parts that I selected for this were based on the human consequences of modernization, the abuse of laborers, the abuse of the peasantry, of agricultural workers, and then also Japan's imperial designs on Korea and Manchuria. So the idea is once they look at these sources, there's a set of suggested discussion questions for them, but overall they should be relating them back in general to this focusing question here up top, which again is how did Japanese reactions to Western encroachment manifest themselves in society and culture. The process for the presentation, again, I would take 5 to 10 minutes in a short lecture, guided slideshow, something like that to give them the basics of the Meiji Restoration, the historical background on the Tokugawa government, arrival of Commodore Perry, the restoration of the emperor, the quest for westernization and modernization, and then the consequences of this rapid um, advance, or this rapid industrialization and modernization. The sources 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are included in a separate document that when you click here will link you to them. The document looks like so. My sources are included here. The first text source covering the 4 mottos that become popular in Japan. I've included them in my notes back here in source number 1. But then the excerpt here is focused on probably the more popular of the phrases that pops up during the Meiji Restoration, which is enrich the country, strengthen the military. Source number 2 are comparing visuals of Commodore Perry. Each of these represents either an eyewitness account, and then as you go, to the left here, you see varying versions that pop up in the public based on, some xenophobic, representations, and then also just, general hearsay and what the public thinks these Americans look like. Source number 3 is about the status of samurai during the Restoration. They're changing social status, they're changing economic status, all related to kind of this push towards greater bureaucracy. Source number 4 is a set of woodblock prints from the 1880s, early 1890s, again showing those strong Western influences, for the Japanese elite and the royal family. The introduction of the parliamentary system, even though the emperor and the oligarchs, the bureaucrats surrounding him were still in charge, and then changing technological advancements around the country, as you see iron bridges, and then also the introduction of the Navy and torpedoes in the background. So the idea is to analyze these images and look at those influences of westernization. And then the final source, as I discussed, was the source we viewed that Professor Lee provided us, showing the consequences of rapid modernization, and then again, Japan as an imperial power. The idea for these sources is that the students or the class, the group, would take roughly 5 to 10 minutes per source to discuss and ultimately relate them back to our focusing question of how those changes and those reactions pop up in Japanese culture. Thanks for your time.